the Trujillo itself, its nickname is the land of eternal spring, because it doesn't vary a whole lot from summer to winter, or hot season to cool season. You're close enough to the equator and on the coast so that you don't have too big of a variance. It's very beautiful there. My first year there, I hadn't acclimatized yet, and so it was cool. It felt really nice all year long. It got pretty hot towards January, February, but you never needed a sweater or a jacket. But by my second year, when it was winter time, I had acclimatized, and so I had to wear the sweater or wear the beanie to bed because my ears would get cold, but it would only drop to about 62 degrees, which sounds kind of wimpy, but it's kind of interesting how that worked. By the time that I'd been in Peru for over a year, it was a lot like the natives. When it got cloudy and it was about 62 degrees outside, you felt cold and you wanted to wear your gloves and a jacket. So I had a lot of areas in my mission. I served in about 10 areas, but there were about 4 distinct regions that I served in. The first area I served in was to the north, and the zone I was in was called Pacasmayo, and it was very hot. There were a lot of rice paddies. A lot of Aussies would show up to surf in Pacasmayo. There was a beach there that had some pretty good waves, from what I understand. I don't surf. But we ran into a lot of Aussies in the city of Pacasmayo itself. And then further north, there was a tiny town called Chipin. And it's very arid. It's very deserty, lots of sand. You can see the Andes way off in the east. They're kind of these bald, conical-shaped mountains, always on the horizon. You can always see. But just the seawater and the humidity just kind of goes up over those first few rows of Andes to make it over into the Amazon and to the Andes to the further east, where they would get all the rain and grow the jungles. So where I was at, everything was built from adobe. Everybody's houses were made from large, flat bricks made of sand and straw that was mixed together with water and then left in the sun to bake. A few houses were made with cinder blocks and cement, but the vast majority in the small pueblos were made out of this adobe. They were about the size of like a 9 by 13 cake pan. That was about the size of the adobe bricks that they used. It never rained. It got really hot. Mosquitoes, they had their season. And then there were crickets. They're called grillos. And crickets, they get pretty noisy at night, and they can keep you up a little bit. But so the northern part of Peru is just known for being hot, and it's very deserty. But even though you're next to the ocean, it's just a hot desert. After that, I was moved further south into Trujillo. And now Trujillo is, I can't remember if it's the second or third largest city in Peru, but it has a lot of fringe cities and towns around Trujillo proper. And I was moved down to one of those called La Esperanza. And it was also very dusty, very deserty, but it was one of the most amazing places I served. I mean, all of the areas I served in I loved, and the people were amazing. But La Esperanza is where I grew a lot. It's known as kind of a tougher part of town. But in all honesty, my companion and I, and the vast majority of the missionaries in our zone, never had any problems. Everybody knew who the missionaries were. Los hermanos, we were the brothers that walked around. And we said hi to everybody. They all knew we didn't have any money, so why would they ever bother us? But that area is a lot of fun. It's a lot busier there. There are a lot of taxis, a lot of combis. They're kind of like 15-passenger vans that they pack like 30 people into. The city was it's right next to the Panamericana, which is a length of highway that travels from the northern part of South America all the way down to the bottom tip of South America, running along the west coast. That's the Panamericana, and that's kind of where the city kind of sprang up was central around that highway. Then in Trujillo proper, there's a little bit more wealth coming into the city. There's definitely some Spanish influence there. They have a lot of these beautiful buildings around the Plaza de Armas, and they have beautiful cathedrals all over the city. Over the summer, it's usually really clear skies, really warm, pretty humid. And then in the winter, it gets pretty cloudy, and it cools off nice at night. But for the most part, there's sun shining all the time, which is why it's the city of eternal spring. And then Trujillo itself, there isn't, I mean, it's just like any other city. There's crime there. There's not crime in certain areas compared to others. In the more impoverished areas, there's more crime, and then in the more affluent areas, there was less crime. They had 2 shopping malls in Trujillo. They had a McDonald's. They had a movie theater. They had this place called, I forgot what it was called. I think it's El Apio. And it's this gigantic, like 4-story building that's kind of like a mall. It's just a store. You could find a store for pretty much anything you wanted in this 4-story building that took up like a block. Everyone had like a tiny shop inside there, anything from a pharmacy over to if you wanted to buy jeans or if you wanted to buy a movie or food. I mean, it was kind of like your gathering place to sell and buy anything you wanted. And there was definitely some industrial areas too that kind of fringed Trujillo. But for the most part, the city is a city of trade. There's a bunch of grocery stores. There's a lot of pharmacies. Everything's kind of coated in dust just from all of the sand that's around and a lot of the taxis and cars. They don't have the same emission codes that many nations are aware of, that many nations impose. So there's always some kind of like dusty film on a lot of the plants and trees. And when there is a rain, it's kind of a mist that just kind of hangs in the air. And it usually washes all the plants off and everything greens up and the flowers get very bright and beautiful. It's an amazing city. I would strongly suggest visiting there if you have the means. There's a place called Chan Chan, which is the largest mud city in the world, which is, it belonged to the native Chan Chan peoples of Peru. And it has survived earthquakes, it has survived all sorts of catastrophes, but a lot of the city is still there. And it's one of those cool places to visit. Now to the far south, there was a city called Chimbote, and their main area of business was fishing. They had a lot of fishing boats over there, and they had a saying that if it smelled like fish, it was good. And if it felt like fish, there was money. And if it didn't smell like fish, there was no money, which is true. They had a fish processing plant there in Chimbote, and you knew when times were good and you knew when times were hard, judging by what everything smelled like. Eventually, you kind of got used to it, but you would start to smell like fish as well. It's a fun place. It's also kind of that arid desert, humid desert, I guess. A lot of sand dunes. The mountains don't have any vegetation. They're all mostly rock and sand. And down in Chimbote, a lot of the houses were made of brick, like this red hollow brick that they had, as well as a lot of adobe houses. It was kind of a good mix between building materials that they had. And then the last place that I served was up in the Andes in a place called Huaraz, and it was really high up in the Andes, very high altitude. It got really cold at night, and it got pretty warm during the day. You're really close to the sun. The air's pretty thin. You had to have chapstick on you all the time, or else your lips would crack and burn. But for for business, a lot of the people up there were farmers. They worked agriculture. There was a lot of terraced fields on the mountainsides where they harvested wheat, they harvested corn. At least from what I saw, that was a lot of the income. There were taxis and combis that had to travel between all the mountain cities as well. My last area was in a place called Jungai, and it was right at the base of the tallest peak in Peru. It's a twin peak called La Huascarán, and it's always capped with snow and glaciers. It's very beautiful in that part of the Andes. There are pine trees and there are palm trees, which is kind of a weird confluence of plants. We had palm trees around the square, but pine trees out in the fields. But overall, it was an amazing experience to be up in the Andes. It was very different from being on the coast. It wasn't as dusty. There wasn't as much sand. And there definitely it wasn't nearly as humid up that high. But those were kind of the four areas that covered the Trujillo mission. Was the north where it was hot, Trujillo, the city itself, the southern cities that were in Chimbote that were kind of sandy, and then up in the Andes itself, where they got a little bit more rain and it got a little greener and they could grow other things.